All right, chapter 26, the Cold War. The Cold War, by definition, is a war between the Soviet Union and the United States where no fighting actually occurs. After World War II was over, we saw a power struggle in the United States where two countries, the Soviet Union and the United States, are going to fight over who is the most powerful nation in the world. It's a competition to see who can build the biggest and the best bombs, to see who can put together the largest military, to see who can put the first person in space, and it's endless, and there's just this constant competition between the two to see just which one was the best. Now, as this goes on, the United States is going to try to unite the world as far as to get together an organization that's going to promote peace in the world, and that is where we get the United Nations. And the United Nations, as it says, is an organization of united countries that promotes world peace. These are countries that came together with common goals, that wanted to be able to work out their problems so that we could avoid massive wars like World War II. So many people died in World War I and World War II, and so much destruction happened that people wanted to create this organization so that they could talk out their problems. Now, one big issue with this is that both the Soviet Union and the United States wanted to be a part of it, but were engaged in this Cold War all at the same time. And as they're engaged in this war with one another, it's going to make it very difficult. And as the bombs that they're creating, the weapons that they're creating get bigger and bigger and bigger, we're going to have the problem of this might lead to an even bigger war. So conflict in the world is still going to be present. So my first question for you to think about is world peace really possible? Why or why not? Explain. All right, now another concept that comes out of the Cold War is the idea of the Iron Curtain. The Iron Curtain is an imaginary line that divided Europe. And on one side, in the West, you've got countries that are free, that are democratic, that were on the side of the Allies during World War II. But on the other side of the Iron Curtain, which is referred to as behind the Iron Curtain, is a communist region. You've got these countries that are controlled by the Soviet Union, these nations that are being forced to adopt a system of communistic government. And those nations are called satellite nations. These nations that are dominated by communism, that are controlled by the Soviet Union, either in totally direct ways or indirect ways as well. Now, looking at a couple of cartoons here, we've got just depictions or artistical depictions of the Iron Curtain. Now, one thing that I do want to make clear, that there was no actual wall there. The Iron Curtain is simply an example that people used to be able to describe how the Soviet Union was controlling Europe. So there was no actual wall there. And don't get this confused with the Berlin Wall that will come into play here down the road. Now, the next question that I have for you is, after World War I and World War II, what do you think the punishment for Germany should be? Should they be allowed to have a military? Should they be allowed to have their own government? You have to take into consideration all the bad things that they did during World War II. Should they be allowed to even govern themselves any longer? Should they be allowed to have that kind of power? And if not, what should be done with them? Who should control them? Who should make the decisions for them? Please answer that in your notes. Here you can see a map that shows just that division of Europe after World War II. You can see that the blue countries are the countries that are going to remain, for the most part, free and under their own control. Now, the red countries, or the countries that we could consider being behind the Iron Curtain, are going to be communist nations, for the most part controlled by the Soviet Union. Now, moving on to the issue of Germany. After World War II, everybody kind of agrees that Germany is not going to be able to take care of themselves. Germany is not going to be able to have their own government and look out for their own interests. So what they're going to do is they're going to cut Germany into 4 pieces. And those pieces are going to be controlled, one by the Soviet Union, one by the British, one by the French, and one by the United States. And so each country is going to have control over what goes on in each section. For the most part, Britain, France, and the United States are going to work together, whereas the Soviet Union is going to kind of go and do their own thing. So then comes the issue of the capital city of Berlin. Now, looking at this map, we can see that Berlin is well inside the Soviet section of Germany. So inside that Soviet section, what we're going to have is a Berlin that is also divided into 4 sections. So you have an American section, a British, a French, and a Soviet section. But the fact that Berlin, that capital city, that very important capital city, is locked inside the Soviet section of Germany is going to cause a lot of problems in the future. So what's going to happen is that the Soviet Union is going to be very, very upset over how this is going to go down, and they wanted to have total control of Berlin. So what's going to happen is the Soviet Union is going to blockade all of Berlin, and for 327 days, so that's almost a year's time, the Soviet Union is not going to allow any shipment of any type of supplies in or out of the city of Berlin, causing the United States, Great Britain, and France to have an airlift, where for almost a year they're going to airlift every little piece of supplies that the people of Berlin need and drop them out of airplanes, because the Soviet Union was not allowing them any access to airports or roads going in or out of Berlin. And here we can see various pictures of people very excited to see the airplanes coming overhead, and then airplanes flying at very low altitudes to be able to drop these supplies. And it was a very difficult, very dangerous thing that the United States, France, and Great Britain were doing, but they felt that it was their obligation to these people to make sure that they were taken care of. Now, in response to all that was going on in the world between the United States and the Soviet Union, the United States made a decision to adopt a new policy in dealing with communism, and that policy was containment. And containment, by definition, is simply not allowing communism to spread. If the Soviet Union wanted to be a communist country, that was up to them, but we didn't want them to be able to spread it to other nations. We wanted to keep it contained inside the countries that were already under communist rule. So to make this a little bit more solid in the world, we adopted 2 different plans, and that was the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan. Now, the Truman Doctrine primarily was to help the country of Greece, but a lot of other countries over in Europe by providing money and military aid. Now, the Marshall Plan also wanted to give money to nations that were rebuilding after World War II so that they wouldn't fall victim to communist influences. We felt that by providing them money that we could stabilize their economy and that communism wouldn't be as appealing to them. Another organization that comes out of the post-World War II era is NATO. And NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was designed to protect all of the nations that were involved, that if the Soviet Union decided to attack one of these nations, that all of the nations would retaliate. Hence the motto, an attack on one is an attack on all. Now, thinking about this then and now, I want you to answer the question, in In your opinion, should the United States be protecting other nations, both then and now? Should we be utilizing our military force and our money to protect other countries? Or should we just kind of stick to ourselves? In your notes, answer that, and please explain why or why not.